thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Future Friends booth today. What brought you to CPAC?
This is my first time up here to CPAC, not my first time to Washington, D.C. I came up because I'm running for Congress in District 20 in the state of Florida. My opponent is Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I don't know if you all are aware of her, but she's quite a powerhouse in Congress, and I don't feel that my constituents, folks, my neighbors, my children are being represented. In fact, we recently saw her on an interview, and she was asked, even though she was voted in as a Democrat, why is she voting as a progressive? And she said under her breath, for the influence. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not representation. That's somebody that's listening to her power brokers for the influence. She's voting for 3 specific bills that have really hurt the constituents of 20 in the last 8 months. The first being the stimulus bill, the second being the cap and trade, and the third, as enthusiastically as possible, as she supported the health care bill. So I'm running against her. We announced our candidacy about a year ago. We've been traveling, meeting the good folks of the Tea Party. DC Works for Us, the 9/12 initiative. And it's really inspiring to see the silent majority finally speaking up.
What kind of messages are you hearing from people as you travel the campaign trail in terms of what issues are on people's minds, how they feel about what's happening in Washington right now?
I think there's a real disconnect. There seems to be what happens in the Beltway is certainly not what's happening around the kitchen table. The 4-letter word that I hear constantly is jobs. In my district, we're experiencing about 11% real unemployment rate. But if you add the folks that are falling off the rolls, the self-employed folks that we have a lot of down in Florida, as well as the folks that are underemployed, it's more like 1 out of 4 are being affected by this recession. And here they have folks in Washington are talking about saving the planet when we know it doesn't, talking about stimulating bills when you know it's just stimulating the unions, and we're a right-to-work state. And they're talking about a health care reform that doesn't reform health care. So it's a frustration of the folks sitting around their kitchen table, watching their television sets, and wondering, what are these people thinking?
The stimulus package just recently had its 1-year anniversary.
Yeah.
I believe it's sometime this week. What has the stimulus done for your district? Has or hasn't done for your district?
Absolutely nothing in my district. We have the highest unemployment now than we've had since the Depression. The bust of the 1920s is what they're equating to what's happening in my district. I do know we're building roller rinks in Indiana. I do know we're building turtle crossings in Tallahassee, but there's really nothing happening in my district, and nor should it, because I don't believe in the stimulus package. What the problem is, you have people up in Washington, D.C. that have been groomed to work in a government type of position. And for them to have a consistent response of government to any kind of problem is like blaming the compass for pointing north. My opponent worked in Tallahassee after getting a degree in political science for only 6 years, and then she works in Washington for another 6 years. So it should be no surprise that government's the answer to any kind of problem. I, however, have worked in the real world. I have over 100 employees. I have a small business. I work in the healthcare industry. I understand the influence of what legislation can make or break, or choose a winner or a loser, and how irresponsible that is. So when it's talking about a stimulus program, these people are looking at only page 1 of Keynesian economics. If you just turn the page to his theory, it says, yes, the government should replace the spending of the private sector if and only if the government has the money to do it. The problem is the government doesn't have the money, and so it's borrowing it. And on page 2, Keynesian says, well, if you borrow it, you're going to create a worse recession, if not a depression, because you're sucking the air out of the, like a vacuum, out of the economy of your future. And so that's what I have a problem with the Keynesian economics and the stimulus program.
There's going to be a summit coming up in the next week on healthcare, and I believe that one of the phrases that President Obama said was that we're going to build on what they already have. Do you think they should build on what they already have, or do we just need to scrap everything and start over?
The way I explain this in healthcare is that if you take every dollar that you're spending, 35 cents is to private sector. And that seems to be working because you and I can still access the healthcare system. The other 65 cents is to government. And that's your Medicare, Medicaid, your S-chip, your VA. That's what's broken. You see, you don't fix a government program by creating a bigger government program. You take and you build on what is working, which is the private sector. And there's 4 easy steps to do that. First of all, if you could just eliminate the tax disadvantage of an individual buying insurance and allow that to be transportable around states, just like your car insurance, and let a Geico save you 15% in 15 minutes, then perhaps we can lower health care costs. And if you couple that with what Texas has done with tort reform, I mean, genuine tort reform where you're protecting the rights of the patient, but also allowing a physician to be in business without stifling it with Medicare, or malpractice insurance, then it works. More doctors are going into Texas, so care is getting better, access is increasing, and rates are reducing. It's tax-free, and it makes sense. So that's where I think our solutions ought to be. It's certainly not government imposed. They're not trying to fix health care. They're trying to take over your economy. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but when you look at their plan, it has nothing to do with addressing the problem.
What do you foresee for the conservative movement in 2010 and beyond?
Good question. I'm excited because for the last 100 years, Republicans and Democrats alike have almost embraced this progressive mentality that the individual was great in the year 1776, but the individual doesn't work in the year 2010. And I think Americans are now saying a resilient no. We believe in the republic. We believe in the individual, our inalienable rights. It's what Jefferson called natural law. Our ability for equal opportunity, not equal results. You see, I believe America is a Super Bowl mentality. We want to be on that field. We want to compete. We don't want the government to pick the teams and to pick who's going to win, who would show up to the Super Bowl. The fact is we love competition, and the government, in my opinion, is stealing our pride, stealing our joy, and just the whole essence of success. And the story I try to explain is I recently moved, and I have a 13 and a 12-year-old. And I asked my son, the 12-year-old, to please pack your room. And of course, you had to repeat yourself 25 times. But when he finally went to his room to pack, he took out his box and chucked the Xbox and this box and all the TVs and all the expensive stuff he's accumulated in his 12 short years. But the one thing he hand carried was the trophy that his baseball team won in the finals, because he earned it. He was so concerned about that intrinsic value of maybe a $12. He was chucking thousands of dollars worth of toys in a box and didn't even care. But it's what you earn is what's most important. And that's what this government in the Obama administration and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, they're trying to take away from you. The incentive to succeed, just to get in the game and to play.
And finally, one of the themes of CPAC this year is saving freedom. What does freedom mean to you, and what can the conservative movement do to preserve freedom generations into the future?
Well, like I was saying, freedom to me is the liberty that creates the opportunity. I believe that our years, the best years for this country, are actually ahead of us. I really do. And I believe that we are really the beacon on the hill. And all we need to do is to get the government out of our way. I know Ronald Reagan said that 30-something years ago, but it's truer today than then. Because when you see what Johnson tried to do in his Great Society, we spent $11 trillion and have a higher percentage of poverty today than we did in 1966. So I'm looking at the disincentive of America, government in America, and I'm looking at the incentive of what the individual can accomplish. So to me, freedom is all about the liberty that creates the opportunity.